All right. Hi, my name is Reed Silverne. The name of this show is Fed Pride. The reason it's called Fed Pride is because I'm a federal worker and proud of it. I've been having different backgrounds every single week, and I've been getting them straight off the internet, which is a wonderful technology. Today, you'll see my background is completely black, and the reason is I just flew in, literally, my arm's tired, from Idaho Falls, Idaho. I can't talk about what I did or what I saw, but there were amazing things there. Not the least of which is some beautiful, absolutely gorgeous scenery. But I'm here. I rushed up. You can see my face is all flushed. And I made it just in the nick of time in order to be able to do the show. And of course that means nothing to you because I'm rushing in on Friday, and you'll probably see this Sunday or Tuesday. If you've been trying to watch my show, you've been watching the same darn show for 2 weeks. So I'm glad to have made it, and I'm glad to be able to produce another show, even if I have a dark screen in the back. Today I'm going to talk about something that was a big story a week ago, and it's still kind of a little bitty story because it's still in Time magazine, but it's faded. And that is my personal pet peeve, Donald Rumsfeld. And apparently Donald Rumsfeld has been not stunned and has been brushing off a number of generals that have called for his resignation. And I couldn't say, boy, where were you a couple years ago? Because you would have prevented bad leadership for a number of years. Now, take into account, please, that I am a Republican, even though I'm more of the McCain variety, moderate Republican, and I'm not a liberal or a get-out-of-Iraq type. In fact, I supported the overthrow of Saddam Hussein, not because he might have had weapons of mass destruction, but because he's a genocidal maniac. He made no bones about it. He genocided people when he could. He attacked his neighbors. He was an absolute nutcase, and I was glad to see him overthrown. And if they ever get around to executing him, I'll be happy to see him executed. However, they didn't finish the job they were doing at the time, and that was to capture and bring to justice Osama bin Laden and the people that killed 3,000 of our people on 9/11. And that alone told me that I couldn't understand why they didn't postpone this whole idea of overthrowing Saddam Hussein until they finished the job that they promised to start. Now, I have to admit, and I'm just going to say it right here on TV, I voted against George Bush 2004. I told all my friends, and of course, who cares what the hell I think, what the heck I think, pardon me, not too many people. But for those few that did and few that might have, I said, if George W. Bush and Donald Rumsfeld and our military and our government captures and brings to justice, or kills and brings to justice Osama bin Laden and al-Zawahiri by election day, I'll vote for him. And if he's free on election day, I'll vote against George Bush. And I did. I voted against George W. Bush, and I think I owe it to, both of you or the few people that do watch this show to actually explain that. So I'm not going to pretend to be somebody who voted for Bush and has now since, in the last couple of months, turned against him and Donald Rumsfeld. I thought that the original first blush campaign, even though I think it could have been done better because I think the diplomacy beforehand was botched, was magnificent. Just the strike, the quick strike, all the way to Baghdad in 8 weeks. I don't think anybody could have done it better. I think it was just a wonderful thing. But Rumsfeld made a decision to turn around. I believe it was the first armored division, but it could have been a different division, and send them back home when they were about to land in Kuwait and back up the troops as they were coming in. I've read articles that there was a meeting between President Bush and Condoleezza Rice on one side, and General Myers, who I think is just the worst general we've had in probably the last 100 years, and I'm not afraid to say it. He was an absolute disgrace, and I think this particular incident, if not apocryphal, which means if true, really shows it. Because he was there with Rumsfeld, and Condoleezza Rice questioned the decision to turn around those 20,000 troops and not to bring them into Iraq in order to secure all the bases and all of the munitions dumps that Saddam had, at least in the area that America had secured by that time, which is only up to slightly north and west of the city of Baghdad. In other words, they hadn't completely won the war, they had overthrown Saddam, and they hadn't secured the whole country. And he was already sending troops back. So there's a big question. So she said, General Myers, does the military support this decision to send those troops back? Do you have enough troops to prosecute the rest of the war and win it? I don't know if she said it in those words, but that was the basis of the question. And the president was present. Rumsfeld answered for Myers. And according to this story, Condoleezza Rice said, Donald, I didn't talk to you. I didn't ask you this question. I asked General Myers this question. And General Myers hemmed and hawed and said, well, I guess we have enough, or words to that effect. Now, if this is true, I think that you have an absolute story here that Myers is just a yes man. And however competent he may have been during the rest of his career, that one meeting put in question his entire career. And in my opinion, Myers, I was just really happy to see him retire. I hope he never darkens our door again. I hope he never gets on TV. I don't think he has a lot of respect of his coworkers, and I think historians will have no respect for him at all. Why? Because of a number of decisions that was made in the wake of the original and successful attack from mission accomplished on. The first was to let the looting and chaos happening. That was not looting and chaos. There was some looting and chaos, but what it was mostly was the Saddam Fedayeen and the other groups that were going to emerge and turn into the insurgency, basically breaking into all these bases and taking these munitions. Saddam supposedly had 1 million tons of bombs, artillery shells, weaponry of one kind or another. 1 million tons. And only a quarter of it was left when they finally secured the bases and did an inventory. Now, in the first year and a half, I tried to add up all the amounts that were being found in these caches. I believe they found about another 250,000. So that leaves 500,000 tons. That's 2,000 times 500,000, which is 1 billion pounds of explosive. And you can imagine where all of the munitions that have been used for all these IEDs. IEDs are basically homemade explosive devices that have blown up our troops in unreinforced Humvees and so on and so forth. And it's really, really a bad thing when your enemy doesn't need a supply line like the Vietnamese did, or the North Vietnamese did in the Vietnam War, brought it down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. But when they don't need any supply line to have weaponry that they can use against you. And that's a situation that's occurred for the last 3 years. And I route that situation. I blame that directly on decisions that were made by Donald Rumsfeld, because Donald Rumsfeld had this theory of military, which was having a lightly armed, fast-moving, highly technological military with very, very few boots on the ground, very, very few soldiers. Soldiers, sailors, and air people. So what does this mean? Well, A, that theory is garbage. Obviously, it doesn't work. We've had 4 years of insurgency behind us, and 4 years it didn't need to happen if they had handled the thing right. Now, Rumsfeld has said over and over again, how could anybody have known that there would be an insurgency? Nobody told him. Well, that is false, because they did tell him. The generals on the ground during the ground war were already experiencing IEDs and suicide bombs. And they said that the Saddam Fedayeen, these irregulars who turned into insurgents and guerrillas, were already active in the initial phase of the war. So if they were already active in the initial phase of the war, what would any intelligent person do? Try to secure all the weaponry from these people. And that's precisely the opposite of what they did. And it's a disgrace. There's no doubt about it. And the blame is firmly on Tommy Franks, who worked for General Myers, who worked for Donald Rumsfeld. And even some of the generals that were part of the initial war, Greg Newbold, Paul Eaton, John Riggs, John Baptiste, who's a major general who's training I believe, the man who's in charge of training the Iraqi troops in order to take over for us, General Swenick, and the most important, of course, is General Zinni. Well, why is General Zinni's criticism so important? General Zinni was the chief of staff in the previous administration, who was replaced by General Shinseki. And he was and even after he stepped down, he was one of the people that had put together a plan to overthrow Saddam. And that plan was based on 380 to 500,000 troops. When General Shinseki, his successor, testified before Congress in the run-up to the war, he was asked directly, how many troops would it take to both win the war and to control Iraq after the war happened? And he said, well, it would be 350,000 troops. He was forced into retirement by Donald Rumsfeld. And a lot of the other generals, especially General Newbold, who's now retired and who's written an op-ed piece saying that pushing him aside the way Rumsfeld did was a disgrace. And that even though Rumsfeld had gone to Iraq at that time, or a little bit after that, he was still fuming over it. Oh no, that was a different general, I'm sorry. So that's the kind of thing that's occurred here. The generals have no faith in Rumsfeld's leadership. The troops have no faith in the leadership of our war effort in Iraq. And now the American people have no faith that we're going to win this war. I think that's wrong. I think we will win this war. I think we can win this war. I think that we need to raise a large number of troops for a short period of time, and we need to do what the theory of military history says is winning a war. And winning a war is breaking your enemy's will to resist. And that is what we never did in Iraq. And the reason we never did it is because we never had the troops to do it. So we've got to go into that Sunni triangle, because it is a Sunni insurgency, and we have to find that 500,000 tons of munitions by kicking down every door and actually taking militarily every single one of those cities in that entire part of Iraq. And we started doing that a little bit after the Second Battle of Fallujah. We went into Fallujah with, I believe, 3,000 or 4,000 troops and tanks behind it. And every time somebody shot at an American, they basically knocked down the building that they were in and took back that town. Now they're in the process of rebuilding it. And they were about to do the same thing when Ramadi, when Zarqawi ended up in Mosul, started, hacking people's heads off and taking scores and scores of people and putting their arms behind their back and shooting them in the back of the head. The guy is an animal. And he's just one wing of the insurgents. And he's not even the biggest wing. He might be one that has one of the most effective strategies, but he's not even the biggest wing. The biggest wing are the former Saddam Fedayeen, who have basically cowed all the people and actually have the support of many in the Sunni Triangle. Zarqawi and the al-Qaeda in Iraq is actually extremely unpopular, even among the Sunnis, and it's been said that he's been kicked out of some cities. He was in Mosul after he got kicked out of Fallujah, and basically about 6-8 months after that, we sent in Kurds into Mosul, and the Sunnis in Mosul actually threw him out. They wouldn't protect him. And then he went to the border with Syria, at least that's what's thought. And he was almost captured one time, but he wasn't captured. Now he's gone on, done his own videotape, very, very rare event, and basically said, I'm going to send hundreds and hundreds of suicide bombers because I got the Americans on the run. Now, I don't see any excuse not to actually take, instead of rotating people in and out and in and out and in and out, which is Rumsfeld's philosophy, actually trying to get the largest group and army that we can in there at one time for 6 months and actually win that war and defeat the insurgents in the Sunni Triangle, and then start pulling Americans out, bringing in Iraqi troops to replace us where we've defeated the enemy. But if we don't defeat the enemy, then what's the use? So actually, in my opinion, as long as Rumsfeld's in there, as long as his yes men are in there, as long as these people who've yesed him and who've had a failing and a wrong approach to this war for 4 years, as long as they're there, I personally don't think we're going to win. But I think we can win. I think we should win. I think we must win. And the first way to do that is to get rid of Rumsfeld and do what these 6 generals wanted, and to clean out the top leadership of the military. I think our troops are doing a wonderful job, but I think they've been very, very ill-served, almost like Vietnam, by an absolutely incompetent general staff, and a general staff that was decimated at the beginning of Rumsfeld's career, who pushed out all the people that said, hey, we need a lot of troops, we need to win a war. If we go in there, we have to defeat Saddam, and just overthrowing him is not enough. We have to defeat any insurgencies and any activities that occur afterward. And Rumsfeld wouldn't listen. He tore up the original plan. He came up with a plan for 50,000 troops. It was even too much for Myers and his gang. And he ended up with a plan for 160,000 troops, and the last 20,000 were not even allowed to land. So his theory is toast. The theory of having this highly technological, fast-moving, very, very lean, almost no actual physical soldiers, robot planes with missiles replacing real soldiers with real guns, that's out the window. That whole theory of transition to the military, even though he is still pursuing it, has been proven to be a complete and total failure. Everybody who is in the Pentagon who supports that theory needs to be fired. Why? Because the theory is wrong. And how do we know it's wrong? It's been proved wrong in battle. And if a theory is proved wrong in battle, Well, I don't think you can prove it wrong any harder. So we've got to get rid of those guys. We've got to get rid of the yes men. We got to get rid of Sanchez and Abizayed. Most of those guys, and I'm not even sure which ones on the ground haven't already retired, because a lot of the original group who yesed Rumsfeld back in 2002 and 2003 are gone. They're retired. Tommy Franks is retired, and good riddance to him. General Myers is retired, and he's defended Donald Rumsfeld. Why? Because his reputation is mixed in with Rumsfeld. He did what Rumsfeld wanted. He went in there without troops. He supported the CPA. He supported standing down the previous Iraqi army instead of trying to co-opt it, which of course was the previous thought pattern. And he was there every step of the way. In fact, he's taken a lot of the blame in his interviews. He said, oh, the military actually did these things, made these decisions. Well, he was the military. He was the chief of staff. And if he did these things, he should be embarrassed. He should be humiliated to show his face in public. And I'm telling you, in 10 years, in 20 years, in 50 years, and in 100 years, every single history of this war is going to trash Rumsfeld. No one is going to have a kind word to say about anything he did, because he is a complete failure. You don't see in any history book of the war in Vietnam anybody saying, oh, General Westmoreland, oh, he was a wonderful general. He just made a couple mistakes. No, he was a horrible general. And he got a lot of Americans killed. And years later, he apologized for it. And you don't see any history book that says, oh, McNamara, who was the Secretary of Defense during the Vietnam War, first stage of the Vietnam War, he was a wonderful Secretary of Defense. He did great things. He just made a few mistakes. No, everyone says he was a horrible Secretary of Defense. He was doing metrics instead of winning a war. And his theory and his approach and his tactics and his strategy were terrible. He should have been fired a year after the beginning of the war. And if we couldn't block the Ho Chi Minh Trail, then we shouldn't have been in there. And we didn't. And we eventually lost the war and went out, but only after 57,000 of our American troops were killed. So, and McNamara has apologized. McNamara has gone on TV and written a book and said, I was wrong. These criticisms of what I did during that war are correct. But we'll never hear that from Rumsfeld, because Rumsfeld is arrogant. And he's always been arrogant. And why should he change now? You know, he's in his 70s. He thinks that he's on top of things. And he thinks that, oh, it's only 6 generals out of all the hundreds and hundreds of generals and admirals that we have throughout the world. But actually, he's only trotted out 2 that actually supported him. And those 2 guys, their reputations are completely mixed up with refurbishing Rumsfeld's reputations. That's Tommy Franks and General Myers. And even Tommy Franks hasn't been very enthusiastic in his defense of Rumsfeld. So what's the result? The result, of course, is nothing. The president has backed Rumsfeld. Rumsfeld apparently is still going to be there. He's never going to put his resignation in. Claims he put his resignation papers in twice, but obviously not very seriously. He didn't do it. He didn't put him in thinking somebody would actually accept him. So I would love to see Rumsfeld do the best for his president. And hopefully, maybe, if he loved his country, which I don't personally think he does, because I don't think he cares about this country, he would resign and then let the president pick a new group who might actually win this war and keep our prestige throughout the world in the Middle East. My name's Reed Silverne. The name of the show is Fed Pride. The reason it's called Fed Pride is because I'm a federal worker and proud of it. Thank you much.